Welcome to the Deep Dive into Agile Marketing Podcast with your host, John Cass. Together, we'll take a closer look at the ins and outs of marketing through an Agile lens. You'll learn from interviews with top Agile thought leaders and practitioners and gain fresh new insights for your journey. Let's get ready to dive in.
Welcome to the Deep Dive into Agile Marketing with John Cass. I'm your host, John Cass, here in Boston, Massachusetts. Today, I'll be interviewing Jayson Gehri, who is the Marketing Director for Hybrid Data Management at IBM. Welcome, Jayson.
Thank you.
So let's start off by you telling the listeners a little bit about your background and your current role at IBM as Marketing Director for Hybrid Data Management.
Great. Yeah, I've been in technology marketing for about 14 years now. I've worked at small companies and I've also worked at large companies. I worked at a software company that ultimately got acquired by Dell, and I worked for Dell for 4 years. And during that time is when I actually first rolled out Agile marketing to my organization. And I left Dell in 2017 and started at IBM, and I'm in my current role, which is to lead a worldwide marketing team focused on a specific set of products within IBM's software. And we rolled out Agile here as well after I started, and my team's been operating under Agile practices for the last, year and a half now, I think.
Oh, excellent, excellent. So let's get into detail, going into the your background with Agile marketing. When did you actually start using Agile? Was it at Dell?
It was at Dell. I think when we rolled it out was 2015. It was a bit of a long process because we did a lot of planning in advance and then rolled out training globally for all of the software marketers in Dell. But yeah, I think it was 2015.
So it's interesting because I'm familiar with the astounding success with social media that Dell made, and also I've been talking a lot with folks at EMC for a while, which is now Dell because Dell bought EMC, and they actually had a very strong Agile marketing tradition at EMC. Was the formation of the use of Agile marketing at Dell from within the company, or did the connections with EMC influence anything?
It was actually before EMC. So Dell stood up a software division in 2012, and I was part of the acquisition that formed the software division. And our marketing group within software was completely separate from the rest of Dell marketing. And it was within that software group marketing that the leadership team rolled out Agile. And so we actually did that within the business unit of software. And we actually took that with us when Dell divested that software group as they were buying EMC. So it's great to hear that EMC had the same practice and maybe they're influencing Dell marketing as well.
Yes, I should put you in touch with some of the folks there because they had a very strong tradition. So that's kind of interesting. So yet again, it's another case, would you say, of the software teams helping to influence the marketers in your experience?
For us, it wasn't the development group that influenced us. It really was started with the marketing leadership realizing that we were slow to adjust to change, that we were slow to reprioritize, and that Agile practices could help us at least drive the behaviors that would allow the marketing teams to shift more quickly to changing marketing conditions.
Oh, excellent. So when the marketing leadership team suggested that you start using Agile marketing, how did you get the rest of the team on board to start using the process?
Yeah, so I was actually part of the leadership team at the time, and so all of us came together and we talked about the best way of doing it. And the lead was actually the head of our digital group. And he had a really strong feeling for how we would roll it out. And he wanted the processes to be the same across the entire marketing group. We had about 250 marketers at the time. So he wanted to be very prescriptive. We had an internal CMS slash workflow tool that we were using, and he wanted to update that to support the Agile practices. So he engaged his development team to kind of add some additional features to this internal tool to support Agile. And then he engaged an external agency to actually deliver training for us. And we scheduled a series of trainings over, I think it was a 12-month period, with every single marketing group within Dell Software. And so we had this really prescriptive approach of, here's how we want to do it. We're going to have 1-month iterations, or we called them sprints. We're going to do planning meetings this way. We're going to do stand-ups this way. We're going to set up our workflow tool to support all of this. We're going to hire, we called them Scrum Masters, and basically train the whole organization and then enforce that adherence to the Agile processes the same across all of our teams.
Oh, interesting. So did you start with a test case with one smaller group, or was it really rolled out all at the same time?
We rolled it out to everybody at the same time, and some teams did get started sooner than others due to the way we were doing training, because we literally flew people in from around the world to do live face-to-face training. So we did make adjustments throughout the year as those teams had gotten started and we were seeing what was working and what wasn't. But yeah, it was really top down. We had buy-in from our CMO and all the leadership, and we all drove this all the way through the organization.
Sort of a follow-on question then, were there any issues with adoption with the team, or was it pretty much smooth sailing?
As you would expect, there are people in the organization that embraced it more quickly than others, and there were those who were more reticent to adopt the practices because they'd been doing work a certain way for a long time, and this was a shift to the way they did work. So you had to deal with that in each team and either coach or mentor or provide guidance to get everybody on board, and ultimately everybody did. And some people are just more champions of Agile than others, and I think you'll always have kind of that variation on any team.
So you've described some of the processes that you used over the different departments that you've worked in. How do you manage the process now? So how are you using Agile operationally? Is it Scrum, sprints? What's the process that you use?
So at Dell Software, it was very much based on Scrum. In IBM, the philosophy is very different, and overall, it's very different here, which I find refreshing. But at IBM, there isn't any one framework that we use. Here, we use the terms iterations versus sprints. We talk about Agile focals instead of Scrum Masters. And the idea isn't to focus so much on the process or the framework, but the behaviors and the outcomes that we want to drive through Agile.
Great. And so what results have you achieved with Agile marketing in your different positions?
At IBM, I'd say we've had a tremendous impact in the organization. And by the way, at IBM, Agile has been a transformation throughout all of marketing across all of IBM. So 4,000, actually, I think 5,000 plus marketers worldwide. And we measure that in IBM through something called the Agile Health Survey. So we survey all of the marketers, I think once a quarter, and ask them questions about what outcomes are they driving, do they feel like they're able to make changes quickly, and we have about 90+% participation in that survey, and based on those results, we can actually figure out where to focus with the marketers on where to help them with the behaviors and the outcomes. And then with my team particularly, we really rolled out Agile in January of 2018. At the close of 2018, we had grown marketing contribution to revenue over 30%. We had increased marketing contribution to pipeline over 15%. All of our campaign metrics in terms of cost per lead and conversion for sales qualified leads and all of that had all been above IBM standard benchmarks. So we really, I think, utilized Agile throughout our marketing lifecycle to make us more efficient, more responsive, which led to some very strong results for us in the last year.
Great. That's excellent to hear, and also that you're putting metrics on it as well. So that's excellent. What's been some of the feedback from the team? How have they liked the results and the whole process? Maybe even some of those folks that were initially reluctant. What's been the turnaround on all of that?
Yeah, and it was the same here at IBM in terms of some of the team really embraced it and some of the team were a little more reluctant. And I think once they started to see the benefits, everybody really jumped on board and was fully supportive of how we go through our agile practices. And some of the initial benefits were things like we have fewer meetings because we have daily stand-ups and water cooler, or there are fewer emails because we are collaborating directly either daily or in our agile board that we're using to manage the work and collaborate on the work. And then as we see how prioritization works through our planning and being able to adjust what we're focused on based on maybe a launch moves up or an event is coming up where we have to shift some of the workload that we're doing, and it's not just add more to what you're doing, but actually shift things off the board based on what we need to focus on. I think everybody has seen the benefit of that and is really embracing the transparency, the communication, and the prioritization.
That's a very important point, Jason, which is that that issue of the focus and giving people the room to do stuff. Was that some of the feedback that you got back from marketers saying, hey, I can actually focus on what I need to rather than dealing with the nearest crocodile, or what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was always smooth, right? Because
Yeah.
people don't always feel empowered to say no. And that's really what I've worked with my team on is, I don't need to make the decision for you. I give you the permission to engage with your product managers and your sales teams and agree on what the priorities are. And if they shift, that you can make those changes and use your agile board to communicate with those stakeholders and let them know what your priorities are to make sure that you're on the same page. And use me as a tiebreaker if you need to, but I don't need to be there in every decision indicating and dictating what the priorities are. I'm really empowering the team to make those decisions on their own. And really that's one of our goals of agile as well is empowerment and self-direction.
Well, that's excellent. So, how do you get the stakeholders, like the sales teams or the sort of the customers that you're working with, maybe even the C-suite? How do you get them on board with the process? You're providing obviously more transparency there. How does that work out in terms of someone comes along and says, "Oh, I have another project here," but you previously earlier in the month you've already agreed about what the projects were, and is it an easier process? Is there sort of more understanding on the part of outside stakeholders about what marketers are doing now as a result?
Yeah, I think in the past it may not have always been clear what marketing was working on, and we didn't have an agile board where we could clearly document what our priorities are and what we're working on in the next iteration. And now we can clearly bring that up in our cross-functional meetings and say, today, this is what marketing is focused on in the current iteration and the next iteration. Here are the main priorities that we've set. If those things have changed, what are the trade-offs we're going to make? We can't just add more things to the board. So what are we going to either delay or take off in order to bring something new up to the top of the priority list?
Do you think that's one of the reasons why you've had such good results?
Absolutely. I've seen a huge shift in the way the team is able to, one, communicate with stakeholders, and two, prioritize, which I think has helped us shift quickly into what we have to focus on versus just saying, oh, I'll get to that in 4 weeks when I finish my current project, or oh, I'm going to work nights and weekends because I have so much on my plate. And there are times we all have to work additional hours, but I don't ever want my team feeling like they have to constantly put in those nights and weekends to get all that work done. And quite frankly, not everything is that urgent. So it's having those conversations that are helping to really hone in on what is it that needs to get done right now.
And have you had any feedback from the outside stakeholders about this process, sort of getting them thinking about, what it meant to deal with the marketing department, and now those changes with Agile have happened, what it's like now?
I think Agile's been a part of it, but I think it's just the behaviors that we're driving, the communication, the transparency. The feedback we've gotten has been fantastic, that they feel much more aligned with marketing, that they feel like we're at the table with them, and that we're being a partner. And I think in the past, it may have been a bit of a black box. They didn't know exactly what marketing was working on and what results they were driving. And I think now it's a lot more clear. And I think Agile has a large part to play in that.
Excellent. And have there been any differences in your experience for larger departments compared to smaller departments, using Agile?
Yeah, I mean, if you talk to anybody, they always advocate for small agile teams, right? 4 to 8 people all working on a focus project. My team is not that. My agile team can vary anywhere from 15 to 25 people on a stand-up, and that can be challenging. But we still have 15-minute stand-ups, even with all of those people on there. So I actually believe that, yes, there's a limit. You can't have 100 people on an agile team, but you can scale up to a certain size and still be able to execute the processes and drive the behaviors and the outcomes that you want to. I think there are some adjustments that you need to make in terms of making sure people are brief and to the point about what they want to talk about and where they need help. And I think you need to adjust some of your processes accordingly. But I think a lot of the things are the same, right? And for us at IBM, it's all about driving those behaviors of transparency and trust and communication. It's all about focusing on outcomes. And I think you can do that in a small team or a larger team.
Excellent. Excellent. So, in your experience, what's the best way to get started with Agile marketing?
So I've done it 2 ways. Dell software, very prescriptive, very, top down. Everybody will do it the same way. IBM's very much the opposite, where we kind of teach the practices, the behaviors, and then we let the teams determine how they want to implement Agile, the length of their iterations, how they manage the board, etc. I actually prefer the IBM way because it makes it more quick to roll out. Everybody's not reliant on everybody else to get a new tool up and running or to wait for training. So actually the way we're doing it here has allowed teams to go more quickly and to customize Agile to what works best for them and their business. And I think I like this better. And no, we're not all using the same tool for our Agile boards. No, we're not all on the same iteration schedules, but I think that's okay. And I think it works for us.
Great, great. So last couple of questions here. What's been the evolution of marketing for you? Have you seen more use of customer journey mapping? Have you seen the use of Agile? Have you seen more the use of Agile for such techniques?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I started my career, Agile marketing wasn't a thing. And it really has in the last 7 to 8 years become more and more prevalent, and to the point where now when I interview candidates for roles on my team and I ask them, have they been involved in Agile marketing? Are they familiar? More and more candidates are actually doing it in their jobs today. So I feel like this is becoming more of a best practice and less of an outlier or a test case in marketing. And in the way we do marketing, absolutely, things change. No longer can you just focus on driving responses or MQLs. You have to focus on the experience that response or that lead is having, and focus on the buying group overall and not just an individual, to make sure that you're giving all of the right information and qualification through that sales process. So, marketing that I did 14 years ago, driving software trials as our primary KPI to what we do today is very different.
Well, great, Jayson. I really appreciate the interview this morning, and thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. It was great.
Well, join us next time, and we'll see you again.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Deep Dive into Agile Marketing Podcast. Be sure and subscribe to our show and leave a review to let us know what you thought of today's episode. And if you like what you heard and want to learn more, visit www.businessagility.institute.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Robbie Samuels hosts the On the Schmooze podcast. Robbie, tell listeners what to expect from the show.
Since 2015, I've interviewed entrepreneurs who overcame challenges to achieve success in their field or industry. Tune in to On the Schmooze to listen as I ask deep questions to elicit untold stories about leadership and networking.
And where can people subscribe?
Find the show at ontheschmooze.com or on marketingpodcast.net, or just search for it wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard them. Go subscribe. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.